in an environment where nothing is trying to predate you, you don't want to reproduce too fast. And it turns out you can actually sort of graph this in a computer. That if you take a given reproduction rate and you take the ability of any given environment to sustain any particular level of population, and you start, say, with a fairly low reproduction rate, and you just plot it over several generations, and you'll find the population goes up and up and up and then sort of steadies out and achieves a nice plateau. Tweak the reproduction rate up a bit, and it goes up a little bit higher, and then maybe settles down and levels out. Tweak the reproduction rate a little bit higher yet, and it goes up, and it goes too high, and it drops down, goes too low, goes up too high, and settles into an oscillating sine wave. Tweak it a bit more, and it starts to oscillate between 4 different values. Tweak it more and more and more, and you suddenly hit this terribly fashionable condition called chaos, where the population of the animal just swings wildly from one year to another, and will just hit 0 at one point just out of the sheer mathematics of the situation. And once you've hit 0, there's kind of no coming back. And so, because nature tends to be very parsimonious and is not going to expend energy and resources on something for which there is no return, so the reproduction rate of an animal in an environment with no predators will tune itself to an appropriate level of reproduction. Now, if there's nothing trying to eat you particularly, then that reproduction rate will be very low. And that is the rate at which the kakapo used to reproduce and continues to reproduce despite the fact that it's been predated, because it doesn't know any better, because nothing has managed to teach it anything different along the way. Because the change that occurred happened so suddenly, there was no kind of slope. There was no slope of gradual evolutionary pressure, which is the thing that tends to bring about change. If you have a sudden dramatic change, then there's no direction to go, and you just have disaster. So, again, if I can anthropomorphize for a moment, what seems to have happened is that the animal suddenly reaching a crisis in its population thinks, well, I better just do what I do fantastically well, do what is my main thing, which is I reproduce really, really slowly. And its population goes down, well, I better really do what I do and reproduce really, 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 really slowly. And it seems absurd to us because we can see a larger picture than they can. But if that is the type of behavior that you've evolved successfully to produce, then to do anything else would be against kakapo nature, would be an in-kakapo thing to do. And it has nothing to teach it any other than to just do what it's always done, to follow its successful strategy. And because times have changed around it, it's no longer a successful strategy, and the animal is in terrible trouble. There's another animal we went to find, which is in even worse trouble now. And this is the baiji, the Yangtze River dolphin, which is an almost blind river dolphin. The reason it's almost blind is that there's nothing to see in the Yangtze River. Thousands and thousands of years of agriculture along the banks of the Yangtze River have washed so much mud and silt and so into it that the river has become completely turbid, which is a word I didn't even know the meaning of until I saw the Yangtze River, and basically you can't see anything in it. And so these animals, dolphins, as I say, gradually they abandoned the use of sight. Now, as we all know, marine mammals also have this other faculty available to them, which they can develop, which is that of sound. And so what the Yangtze River dolphins did was over thousands of years, as their eyesight deteriorated, so their sonar abilities became more and more and more sophisticated and more powerful and more complex. And it's very interesting. You can actually watch, if you feel like it, the development of a Baiji fetus. And you'll see that as you may or may not know, there is a certain amount of truth in the idea that the development of the fetus recapitulates stages in the evolutionary development of an animal. And you see right at the beginning of the development of the fetus, its eyes are in the normal dolphin position, which are kind of relatively far down on the side of the head. And gradually, as the generations have gone by, its eyes have kind of migrated up the side of the head. And you see this happening as the fetus develops. Because gradually, over the generations, there's only light coming directly from up above, and there's no ambient light. And then, as that too dies out, so the eyes gradually atrophy. And instead, the sonar abilities take over, and these animals developed incredibly sensitive and incredibly precise abilities to navigate themselves around in the water just using sonar. And all is well and good until the 20th century, when man invents the diesel engine. And suddenly all hell breaks loose beneath the surface of the Yangtze, because it's suddenly full of noise. And so suddenly these animals find themselves trapped by something that nobody had any means of foreseeing, that the thing they now rely on has been completely overwhelmed by the noise pollution that we put in the oceans. And so suddenly these animals that used to be so sophisticated in their ability to find their way around are sort of bumping into things, bumping into boats, bumping into ships' propellers, finding themselves ensnared in fishermen's nets and so on, because we've basically screwed up the next of their faculties. And it's a very curious feeling. I remember sort of sitting on a boat on the Yangtze River and trying to look into it. You couldn't look into it because it's turbid, and you remember what turbid means. And realizing that all this noise down there as well means that even it's very curious to think that there may have been a dolphin somewhere near me. I didn't know. I mean, by this stage, this is 10 years ago, there were only 200 left in a stretch of water about 200 miles long. So you had no idea if there's one anywhere near you. But it's curious because you think if you and another person, another creature, are kind of in the same world, then you must be feeling roughly similar. But one of the things you begin to realize when you look at different animals is that because of their evolutionary history and because of the forms they have developed into and the ways they have developed of perceiving the world, they may be inhabiting the same world, but actually a completely different universe. Because you create your own universe from what you do with the sensory data coming in. So you realize that you're here and there's a dolphin there, and you're comfortable, and the dolphin may be actually in a species of hell, but has no means of communicating that with you because we've kind of taken charge, and there's no way of kind of communicating with the management that there's a problem. So I suddenly became very interested in what it must actually sound like in the Yangtze River. Now, we'd gone to record some BBC radio programs while we were there. So as well as Mark Carwardian, the zoologist, we also had a sound recorder from the BBC. So I said to him, could we actually drop a microphone into the Yangtze so we can see what it actually sounds like in the river? And he said, well, I wish you'd said that before we left London. I said, why? And he said, well, because I could have just checked out a waterproof microphone. But you didn't mention anything about recording underwater. And I said, no, I didn't. Is there anything we can do about it? And he said, well, there is actually one technique they teach us at the BBC for recording underwater in an emergency. Do either of you have condoms with you?